Hello dear 1000 PS friends, and a warm greeting from Alicante. As you can already see beside me, I am here at the presentation at the premiere of the new Yamaha MT-07, and I really push to be part of this event because I believe this motorcycle will be one of the most important bikes or one of the biggest new releases of 2025. And why that is and how it performed, I'll tell you in just a moment. Right then, folks, it has actually happened. I am standing in front of the 4th generation of the Yamaha MT-07, and in my opinion, this is a really important motorcycle on the market. Why? Because it is one of Yamaha's best sellers, and I never get tired of talking to people in the industry about what I like to call the Yamaha MT-07 move. What do I mean by that? Quite simple. The Yamaha MT-07 was introduced for the first time in 2014, and back then in Austria it cost 5,999 euros at launch, so basically 6,000 euros. And at the time you got the predecessor of this bike for 6,000 euros, which was an absolute bargain. And I really think Yamaha nailed it with that move. They basically took over that entire segment. What was there at the time? A Suzuki SV650, and Yamaha just swept the floor with it. They completely revived that entire segment because now we have this, let's say, beginner to light middleweight class of motorcycles, and the MT-07 didn't just make its mark on it, it completely revolutionized it. Because never before had you been able to get that much bike for that kind of money. And now we have the 4th generation right here, and a lot has changed. But before I dive into all the details, there's one thing I'd like to say. Time and again we hear people say, oh, those spoiled motorcycle journalists always ride around in the finest gear and money is no object. So I thought, since this is more of an entry-level to mid-range bike, I'd deliberately wear gear that someone with a similar budget for the bike could realistically afford. And as you can see here, I'm fully kitted out in Bonucci gear, including helmet from Lewis's in-house brand. My entire outfit cost 850 euros, from head to toe, including the helmet. So yes, it is absolutely possible to get stylish and decent motorbike gear without spending a fortune. And I'll also share my experiences with this gear in the test report that's linked down below. But back to the bike. As I said, I believe this is the most important, or at least one of the most important, new releases of 2025. The 4th generation has gone through a lot of changes. There's already a video from my colleague Horvath where he explains most of the technical updates, so I won't bore you now by reciting the spec sheet and listing all the technical data. That video is linked, so go give it a watch if you want all the facts and figures. What I want to talk about now is how this bike actually rides. And I want to jump straight into that because, as I often do before going to a launch, I asked on social media what you're most interested in. And some of you who've already looked into this bike a bit will know that there have been a few major changes. Besides the design, which you notice immediately, especially the front, the big update has been to the electronics. You can see it in the display and in the new features it brings. Then there was a major suspension update. You can also spot that from the fork and the brakes. And there was another update which concerns the gearbox. Yamaha now offers, alongside the conventional 6-speed manual gearbox with clutch and foot lever, what they call Y-AMT or Y-AMT. It stands for Yamaha Automated Transmission. What does that mean? You now have the option, if you want, to ride this motorcycle without actively having to shift gears. It's a mix between an automatic, there's a fully automatic mode and a semi-automatic mode. And let's stick with the gearbox for a moment, because that was actually the most asked about topic on social media. So there are 2 versions to choose from, the conventional gearbox and the Y-AMT. The Y-AMT costs 600 euros extra in Austria, 500 euros in Germany, and 400 Swiss francs in Switzerland. Is it worth it? Well, that's a really tough question for me, because the Y-AMT is a blend of performance features. It's got features depending on where you are in your development as a motorcyclist. And how does it actually work? Like I said, there are two gearbox versions, the Y-AMT and the standard manual gearbox. I probably don't need to explain much about the manual one. We all know it, it works. And I've got to say, it worked great during the test as well. A nice extra. Yamaha also offers an optional quick shifter, both up and down for the standard gearbox. But back to the Y-AMT. So how does it ride? Basically, just how you'd imagine an automatic, like the kind you may already know from cars. What happens? The system, by the way, it's located down here, includes an automatic clutch. That means when you pull away, stop, or change gears, the bike handles the clutching and shifts through the gears all by itself. The system adds 2.8 kilograms in weight, but honestly, that's negligible when you consider the bike's total weight is 183 kilograms. Those extra 3 kilos really don't make a difference. Now, during the ride itself, I have to admit, at first it was a completely new experience for me. Why? Because I've never ridden anything like this on a bike before. The system is already known from the MT-09, but I hadn't tried it there yet. So now I basically have several ways to shift on this bike, or not shift at all. There's a switch here that lets me choose between manual mode and automatic mode, so I can actually ride the bike fully manually if I want. If I go into manual mode, I've got a rocker switch here. Yamaha calls it the seesaw switch. That means I can upshift with my index finger and downshift with my thumb. Or I press the plus switch with my index finger to upshift. It's pushed forward, and I downshift the same way, because it's always a rocker switch. And here's how it works. In manual mode, there are two settings, D and D+. That's what they're called. One stands for drive, and the other is drive plus, which is a bit more performance-oriented. That means I can ride at higher revs for longer. The bike downshifts earlier and lets the gears stretch out longer. Now, in everyday riding today, I have to say, sometimes it worked better, sometimes not so much. And I want to be completely honest about that. I also want to say that personally, I had more fun today with a completely normal manual gearbox. But, and this is important, I do see the value in this Y-AMT system, particularly because it can act as a sort of learning aid for beginners, even though it does completely eliminate the clutch lever. But more than anything, it's a nice comfort feature. Especially in the city, obviously, when sometimes you just don't want to be constantly shifting up and down. Or maybe when you're already a bit tired, not fully focused, or just want to clock up some kilometers, then it's a really handy feature. Because in full automatic mode, you can basically switch off the part of your brain that handles shifting. You just twist the throttle and brake. That's it. Brilliant. Now, when you ride in the semi-automated mode, that is using the rocker switch and manually shifting up and down, for me, that was honestly quite a challenge at first. Simply because after nearly 20 years, I've got it drilled into me, pull the clutch and shift gears with your foot. That's just not the case here. There's no clutch and there's absolutely nothing to do with your foot anymore. It's all done with your hand. And getting that into your head, well, I have to admit, it was a challenge for me at the start. But once you get into it, it works, I'd say, pretty solidly. Actually better than expected, but still not perfect. Why? One key point is that when shifting up, you sometimes feel a bit of a jolt. Shifting down, on the other hand, works really smoothly. That's something where I honestly expected a little more. But to be fair, this is the first time this system has been implemented in this bike, so there's definitely still room for development, right? I think that just about covers everything on the Y-AMT. Let's talk about the other new features. The foot pegs have been moved 10 millimeters lower, and the handlebar has also been lowered by 22 millimeters and widened by roughly 9 millimeters on each side. That means the riding position is now a bit more front wheel oriented, and the knee angle is slightly more relaxed. But since the foot pegs are placed a bit closer to the center of the bike and the suspension has been improved, you actually get more lean angle clearance despite the more relaxed seating position. So the foot pegs now touch down much later, and during the test we were genuinely surprised, as were the other journalists on site, at how late the new MT-07 scrapes its foot pegs compared to its predecessor.
Exactly. The fork is no longer as underdamped as it used to be, but quite the opposite. No matter the riding situation, you constantly get the sense that the fork is working very precisely, it responds nicely, and it always has enough reserves, enough hydraulic support, so you no longer get that abrupt diving when braking hard.
We've got a completely new chassis. You can already see it. There's a 41mm upside down fork at the front. It's non-adjustable with 130mm of travel. And at the front, we've now got 4-piston radial mounted brake calipers. These are new. The brake disc diameter of 298mm hasn't changed. The pads are the same, and the discs are also the same as before. So basically, the only thing that's changed is the caliper itself. Up here, we've still got a standard axial master cylinder. This brake setup works well, really well. For this class, it's absolutely sufficient in every riding situation. But what you really notice, especially now with the stronger fork at the front, which is an improvement, is that compared to the previous model, it dives a lot less. It just holds itself up more. To put it another way, you've now got more damping. When braking, you can really feel the hydraulics coming into play. It helps you out, and you don't get that excessive front-end dive. So in that sense, the front is a major upgrade over the 3 previous generations of the MT-07. Now that the front end has been made sportier with the improved suspension, they had to revise the entire chassis. That means the main frame as well as the rear linkage and swing arm. The whole bike is around 13% stiffer overall, and as a result, noticeably more capable, sportier and tighter, without becoming uncomfortable. At the presentation, they said the goal for the 4th generation of the Yamaha MT-07 was to make it more mature. And I'd say this is by far the most refined version of the MT-07. They've managed to keep it an entry-level bike, but now with the added bonus that even experienced riders can still have a lot of fun in the saddle.
After all, there is now a new braking system available. The rear shock blends in with this setup fairly harmoniously, but I have to admit I liked it a bit less. The rear shock feels slightly underdamped when riding over quick sharp bumps, because at first it feels a bit harsh and then it starts to make the rear of the bike sway slightly. But to be fair, you are already riding very quickly on the MT-07 when that happens. And just a quick word on the tires as well. It comes fitted with Dunlop Sportmax Q5A, which is a sport touring tire from Dunlop that fits nicely with the MT-07 package. The tire has a very neutral turn-in behavior, just like the bike itself, and it works really well. So now with the tire, the new suspension and the stiffer chassis, you can ride more precisely along your line and do not run the risk of the bike becoming unsettled at the front or rear.
What else is new? Electronics. We now have traction control, ride-by-wire throttle, ABS, but take note, there's no IMU. That means we don't have lean angle sensitive electronics, just standard systems. Is that a drawback? On paper, yes, but in everyday riding, no. Today we rode on fantastic roads with excellent grip, and the traction control only kicked in once, and I had to deliberately provoke it. I'm still convinced that because the engine in this bike is so good, you don't necessarily need traction control. The ABS kicks in a bit later than usual, but still fairly quickly, and that's totally fine. What really is a huge benefit of the ride-by-wire technology now is that we've got different riding modes. There are 3: street, sport, and a custom mode that you can configure to your own liking. What's also possible is switching the traction control off completely. But to do that, you need to go into a submenu. Once it's off, it stays off across all modes. And every time you turn the ignition off and back on, traction control automatically reactivates. Something I forgot to mention, cruise control is only available if you choose the Y-AMT Gearbox. It comes as standard with that setup. The conventional manual gearbox doesn't come with cruise control. What's also new is the 5-inch full-color TFT display, the same one we know from the MT-09 with identical functions. That means I can choose from different themes, I can even have navigation on it if I want, and I can pair it with my smartphone. So yeah, really everything you need nowadays is included. Alright, final words on the engine. I saved that bit for last on purpose. Why? Because the engine is the heart of this motorcycle. And of course a lot of people were wondering, now that Euro 5 Plus is coming, can the CP2 engine still keep its lovely sound? Yes, it can. Why? Well, manufacturers obviously have to make the bikes quieter and cleaner, and that has to be compensated somehow. So how did they do it? There are 4 holes here, so right here in the center tank cover they've included what they call a sound enhancer. That means similar to the MT-09 where the intake noise flows upwards, they've tried to implement the same idea on the MT-07. So here as well, some of the intake sound is channeled upwards toward the rider, and honestly I still think that's a really cool and clever touch because I'm sitting on this bike and I want to hear that sound, and now it's coming from just below me, not way down below and blasting off into the surroundings. Alright, time for my conclusion. We've more or less arrived at the best version of the MT-07 I've ever ridden. I've ridden every generation, and what we've got here is quite simply the best MT-07 of all time. Very briefly on pricing. In Austria, it costs 8,800 euros with the manual gearbox. The Y-AMT adds 600 euros. In Germany, it's about 8,500 euros with a 500 euro surcharge for Y-AMT. And in Switzerland, the price is around 8,600 Swiss francs plus 400 francs for the Y-AMT. Right, I think I've covered everything there is to say about this motorcycle. I hope you were able to take something useful from this review. I had to speed things up a bit because I was told I only had 12 minutes for my presentation. So with that in mind, apologies if I missed anything. If you feel something's missing, drop it in the comments. I'll be happy to answer. And here's some good news. We're getting an MT-07 with Y-AMT as a long-term tester. That means we'll be able to keep producing content with this exact kind of bike throughout the year. So there's definitely more information to come. Thanks for watching. I look forward to your comments. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and hopefully see you again soon. Take care. Bye for now.